following is a clip from an interview with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg on a German news media outlet. The interview was in English but dubbed in German. For those of you who listen to my videos on audio only, I have placed my own voice over to read the English translation.
Do you fear that the position of Ukraine will not improve but worsen in the future? For instance, the EU wanted to deliver 1 million artillery shells to Ukraine, but was only able to provide 300,000 from existing stocks. Nothing was produced. We have to prepare for some bad news. Wars move in phases, but we must stand with Ukraine in good times and bad.
Outnumbered and outgunned, on the front line, a Ukrainian soldier has given a sobering account of Ukraine's struggle to cling onto its foothold on the east bank of the vast Dnipro river in Kyiv. Several hundred Ukrainian soldiers have made it there as part of a counter-offensive launched 6 months ago. A Ukrainian soldier's account, captured via a messaging app, speaks of boats being blown out of the water, inexperienced reinforcements, and a feeling of abandonment by Ukraine's military. And here are some direct quotes from the soldier as published in the BBC. The entire river crossing is under constant fire. I've seen boats with my comrades on board just disappear into the water after being hit, lost forever to the Dnipro. We must carry everything with us: generators, fuel, and food. When you're setting up a bridgehead, you need a lot of everything, but supplies weren't planned for this area. We thought after we made it there, the enemy would flee, and then we could only transport everything we needed, but it didn't turn out that way. When we arrived on the eastern bank, the enemy was waiting. Russians we managed to capture said their forces were tipped off about our landing, so when we got there, they knew exactly where to find us. They threw everything at us: artillery, mortars, and flamethrower systems. I thought I'd never get out. Every day we sat in the forest, taking incoming fire. We were trapped. The roads and paths are all riddled with mines. The Russians cannot control everything as we use it, but their drones are constantly buzzing in the air, ready to strike as soon as they see movement. Supplies are the weakest link. The Russians monitored our supply lines, so it became more difficult. There was a real lack of drinking water, despite our deliveries by boat or by drone. We paid for our own kit, buying generators, power banks, and warm clothes ourselves. Now the frosts are coming. Things will only get worse. The real situation is being hushed up, so no one will change anything. No one knows the goals. Many believe the command has simply abandoned us. The guys believe that our presence had more political than military significance. And lastly, perhaps the most telling quote of them all from this candid Ukrainian soldier. He says, "Several brigades were supposed to be posted here, not just individual companies. We just don't have enough men. There are a lot of young guys among us. We need people, but trained people, not the green ones we have here now. These are guys who had spent just 3 weeks in training and only managed to shoot a few times. It's a total nightmare. A year ago, I wouldn't have said that, but now, sorry, I am fed up. Everyone who wanted to volunteer for the war came a long time ago. It's too hard to tempt people with money. Now, we are getting those who didn't manage to escape the draft. And you may laugh at this, but some of our Marines cannot even swim. The BBC states that though President Zelensky has been keen to talk up this Kherson bridgehead offensive, framing it as the beginning of something more, this soldier's testimony reveals the splits between Ukraine's government and its generals over the state of this Ukraine war. The Week publication writes that the relationship between Zelensky and Zaluzhny is understood to be terrible after Zaluzhny's stalemate comment to The Economist. The reports of tensions between the military and the government in Ukraine have done little to stem the decline of public morale, and trust in the government has tumbled, said Reuters. There's a growing level of exhaustion among Ukrainian troops.
Ходишь на турникете, да? Да. Давай. Давай. Турникет я ему дал, по-моему, сейчас 7 часов. Да він залізе.
And their families at home and those in charge are facing difficult choices in trying to maintain the flow of recruits, writes the newspaper. But Zelensky is not only at beef with Ukraine's commander-in-chief, Valery Zaluzhny. Kyiv mayor and former boxing champion Vitaly Klitschko has told Der Spiegel, a German newspaper, that Ukraine is moving towards authoritarianism, seemingly making a veiled criticism of President Zelensky. The Kyiv mayor said Ukraine was leaderless and chaotic in the opening months of the full-scale war. Despite being the mayor of Ukraine's capital, Klitschko said he hasn't spoken to Zelensky since the beginning of the Russian invasion.
No way around the simple arithmetic that if there's no funding to provide weapons to Ukraine, we're just not in a position to continue to provide weapons to Ukraine.
The White House said it is out of money and nearly out of time to provide more weapons to Ukraine.
I need that money.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
As it tried to ward off Russia's invasion unless Congress acts to approve additional funding and support. In a letter to Congress this past Monday, it was stated that the government has already gone through about $11 billion of appropriated funds for Ukraine's military aid. Shalanda Young, the director of the Office of Management and Budget, wrote in a letter as follows: I want to be clear, without congressional action, by the end of the year, we will run out of resources to procure more weapons and equipment for Ukraine and to provide equipment from US military stocks. There is no magical pot of funding available to meet this moment, she said. We are out of money and nearly out of time.
I have no idea what the Biden administration's end game is in Ukraine. I mean, I have nothing but sympathy for the Ukrainian people, nothing but contempt for Putin. But Putin is not going to lose this war. They've got the resources. Russia has nuclear weapons. So Russia will not lose this war. You have to recognize that reality. I don't like that reality, but it's true. So the only way this war ends is in a negotiated settlement. I take no joy in that. More of Ukraine gets destroyed. So the sooner that they reach a negotiated settlement, the better from my standpoint. This war has to end. We're not going to like the result, but every day that goes by, we're going to like the result less.